And we're going to switch gears and talk about shared services arrangements. So thank you for those who have stayed on with us this afternoon. Now, you might want to begin by knowing what an SSA or shared services arrangement is. So a shared services arrangement is essentially an agreement between two or more entities, usually school districts, charters, or ESCs, to work together on a grant. And I believe I saw this question in the chat earlier as well. So they may decide to work together for a number of reasons. This could be to get the most bang for their buck. They determine that they can maximize the use of their funds by working together. Some also don't want to carry out the administrative responsibilities of the grant. So many reasons why folks make the decision to join an SSA. So SSA members must designate a fiscal agent who is responsible for managing the grant. So they're responsible for making sure that grant requirements are carried out. And they also have lots of administrative duties that they're responsible for. And we're going to talk about some of those. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a deeper look at what some of those administrative duties are. For the purposes of TEA grants, an SSA or shared services arrangement has one application, and it is the responsibility of the fiscal agent to submit that application on behalf of its members. The fiscal agent is accountable for ensuring that grant funds are used in accordance with grant provisions. They're responsible for maintaining all SSA financial and personnel records required by TEA in accordance with financial accounting and reporting. And they're responsible for managing the SSA in accordance with federal statute. And this one is the one that's the most interesting to me, right? This one is the one that's the most interesting to me because it says the fiscal agent may also be responsible financially for instances of non-compliance or misappropriation of funds by any SSA member. So this to me almost sounds like I'm signing a loan for someone. So we want to make sure that we know what our responsibilities are when we join. I think I saw a question related to this as well in the chat, but when I went to look for it, it was gone. So we're going to talk about it here. If you're in an SSA, a formal written agreement is required, and you will see language on the ADC applicant designation and certification form regarding this. So once your school district certifies and submits that ADC, that means you're certifying that you already have a written agreement. I wanted to point out that TEA does not review these agreements, or we don't receive copies of these agreements. So this is between the fiscal agent and their members. The agreement should define everyone's role. It's a legal agreement, right? So what are the responsibilities of the fiscal agent? What are the responsibilities of the members? Oops, I think I got a little bit ahead of myself. Yeah, so what are the responsibilities of the fiscal agent and what are the responsibilities of the members? The agreement must be maintained on file by the fiscal agent in case an auditor or monitor requests it. All right, now we're on to the next slide. So the next couple of slides identify what the SSA agreement should include at minimum. It can always include more information. It should include how the SSA is organized, how it's structured, who owns any assets that are purchased through the SSA. It should address policies and procedures on how the assets are disposed of if a member leaves or if the entire SSA is dissolved. And we sometimes hear about this from time to time when things are not properly outlined in the agreement, and it can get a little bit tricky. And I believe someone asked about this earlier as well. This agreement should also explain what happens to carryover funds if a member leaves. So do the funds follow the member? Do they remain with the SSA? So that should be outlined here. It should describe how liabilities, including legal fees, will be handled and how the costs are allocated by the SSA. What funds are going to be held by the fiscal agent? What is going to be purchased? And what, if any, funds are passed on to the member districts? The agreement should outline the specific responsibilities of the fiscal agents and all members. What services are the fiscal agent going to provide to the members? What personnel are they dedicating to the project? It should also identify budgeting, accounting, and reporting responsibilities because, again, it's important that this information is clear. What are the responsibilities of the SSA members? What staff members are they allocating to the SSA? What are their responsibilities when it comes to budgeting, accounting, and reporting? Because they have responsibilities too, right? They have a responsibility to get the information to their fiscal agent in a timely manner. And any timelines or information related to that needs to be identified here. This table is a handy reference that identifies the responsibilities of fiscal agents versus members. Remember, everyone has to complete an ADC, right? Because that is what controls the shared services arrangement as far as the application is concerned. But there's only one application, and that is submitted by the fiscal agent. Everyone has responsibility related to use of funds, maintenance of financial and personnel records, and financial and programmatic compliance, dependent upon what's outlined in that SSA agreement. And as for the agreement itself, the fiscal agent is the one who has the relationship with TEA, so they're responsible for maintaining that agreement, but everyone should have a copy. Everyone should have a copy. So now we're going to talk about how shared services arrangements are managed in grant applications. And you've heard this form talked about many, many times today. So shared services arrangements are managed through the ADC. And this form looks like a very simple form. It's actually not, it's really complex. And I call it, sorry, I call it small but mighty because it controls a lot of stuff. And SSAs are managed based on the designations that are selected in this form. So as mentioned earlier, fiscal agents must first designate themselves as the fiscal agent. And this is why we typically open the ADC for fiscal agents for ESSA first. And then member districts join their SSA by selecting them. They're going to select apply as member, and then they will select their fiscal agent from the drop-down menu. Now, if the fiscal agent is not in there yet, it means they haven't completed their ADC. So the member district should not just choose one. We've seen that happen. We've seen that happen quite a bit. And I believe it was mentioned earlier, if you're choosing a district outside of your region, you normally get a warning message. So pay attention to those warning messages. But if your fiscal agent is not in there, you'll need to contact them and let them know that you're trying to complete your ADC and you don't yet see them in the drop-down. So this form controls where, This form controls where the funding goes, right? So if you are in Region 1 and you choose a fiscal agent in Region 16, what is that, about 700 miles away? So you're tied together in that SSA. So it may not be feasible from a service standpoint. And we've seen this happen. We get notified late into the grant period that there was an accident. As a matter of fact, I was doing some research on an issue recently, and I discovered a member district that was a part of an SSA that was maybe about 400 miles outside of their region, and I nearly panicked, but I didn't. I said they may have a valid reason for this. So the negotiator reached out to that school district, and the school district did, in fact, have a valid reason for being in that shared services arrangement. But you want to check this because this is where the SSA determines what fund sources appear on your application. It determines where your money goes if you're in an SSA. So if you're in Region 1 and you choose 16, your money's in 16. Um, let's see, as fiscal agents, there's a report that allows you to see your SSA members, and I believe I have that on the next slide. Um, the last two things I wanted to point out are that certifying and admitting, I mentioned this earlier, certifying and submitting the ADC means you have a written agreement. It's in that certification language. You are also certifying that your SSA will remain effective for the duration of the project period. So here we go. So this schedule, the BS 6001, allows fiscal agents to determine who has joined their SSA. And we call this report the SSA member report. So if you're a fiscal agent, these buttons will be active for you. You can click on the button and it will identify who is in your SSA as well as the allocation amount. And again, it's driven by the selections that are made on the ADC. And if someone is missing from your ADC report, then you need to contact them to submit their ADC and select you as a fiscal agent. These two buttons it's just two different versions of the same report. One is in Excel and one is a crystal report. So this information is available to you to check early on in the submission of the application and throughout the life of this grant, just to make sure that everyone's there who you expect to be there and that no one accidentally selected you who's not supposed to be there. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dee Dee.
Thank you, Tasha. Okay. I'm going to go over the PS 3109, the REAP and funding transferability sections as it relates to a fiscal agent and what a fiscal agent would see for their members. So if you are a fiscal agent, the REAP section will look just like the one I went over this morning. The only difference is you will see the same information for each individual member. So if you would complete like part A under REAP for each individual member if they are exercising REAP. And the same goes for funding transferability. So it will list for every member, you would also address funding transferability. And this could be different for each individual member depending on the agreement that you have with your member as to what you're going to do with the funding. And then once you complete this schedule, this is what, if you're doing a special like funding transferability, that will show on your Title I Part A schedule, your Title II Part A schedule, and your Title IV Part A schedule. It will also impact what is entered onto the PS 3099 for private schools. And then the prior year data, again, will be the same. You will have under funding transferability and REAP will populate the member information if there is carryover for either Title II and or Title IV on the BS 6001 budget schedule for the prior year. So it would just depend on what is populated for carryover on the budget schedule, and that usually happens in the spring. And that's when you will have to, you as the fiscal agent would go into the PS 3109 and adjust, if needed, the prior year data. Okay. This is the SC 3099, the PMP schedule. This is not part of the application. This is, this schedule is only available when a district applies as part of a shared service arrangement for all the programs that they are eligible to apply for. And you can find the schedule under the special collections, and you will see where it'll say 2526 SC private school services. And that opened on May 20th and also due September the 3rd. Then you'd follow the same instructions that are provided for PS 3099. And then this schedule again is outside of the ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application. Amen.
All right, so that concludes our training. Thank you for attending. Again, we would appreciate if you could please provide us your feedback. There's a link in the chat, or you can scan the QR code. Thank you for all you do for the students and families you serve it every day. You truly do make a difference. And we will be posting the questions that were posed in this training in the next 2 weeks, and we will email the link to everyone that registered and attended today's training. Thank y'all and have a great summer.